100% of my videos are scripted, every single one of them. And I do that intentionally because I kind of split tested it at the very beginning when I was starting out making content, and scripted content always performs so much better than non-scripted content because you don't ramble. You provide exactly the value that you want to provide in the shortest amount of time possible, and people's attention spans keep getting shorter and shorter every single day. So I just like to make sure that I can pack as much value in each video as possible, and scripting definitely does help me do that.
What's up, Model FAs? David DeCelle here, CEO of Model FA and your host of the Model FA podcast. And I am very excited about our guests that we have here today. And yes, you heard me correctly, guests plural. We have both Nick Meyer and Nate Hoskin joining us. And before I properly introduce them, there's two people that I want to thank because without them, this wouldn't have happened, or at least wouldn't have happened on this time frame. In no particular order, John Prendergast, I remember, I believe it was you, Nate, you and him did a video on YouTube together. He sent that over to me to get some feedback, and I was like, my feedback is I want him on the podcast. And then I was talking with a client of mine, Amir Noor, and he was chatting with you guys, and he bridged that gap and formally made that introduction. So first and foremost, thank you to John Prendergast over at Blue Leaf, and thank you to Amir Noor over at United Planning. So thank you to both of them. But without further ado, Nick Meyer is a co-founder of N2 Content Marketing and is a CFP. And Nate Hoskin is the founder of Hoskin Capital and the other co-founder of N2 Content Marketing. And I feel, let's just say, silly to admit this, and I saved this for the recording rather than the chit chat at the beginning, but it wasn't until I logged on that it finally clicked what N2 was for. and I was and I was like, oh, wait a second. That makes a ton of sense. So with that being said, Nick, Nate, welcome to the show.
Pleasure being
Thank you
here.
so much for having us. We labored over naming our firm, and we ran through it so many times. We were like, what are we going to call it? What are we going to do? And we were finally like, how about N2? Should it be N squared? No, we'll just go with N2. So that's how we arrived at it.
Love that. Love that. Well, Nick, I want to start with you. So you're a CFP, and certainly forgive me if I'm mistaken, but I believe that you're all in on the content game and brand sponsorships, and obviously N2. You're not actually working with individual clients anymore, retail investing clients, financial planning clients. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So to give you a little breakdown of my story here, I spent the first 4 years after school as a financial advisor, actually working one-on-one with clients, etc. No social presence, like nothing even really touching on the marketing side of the business. But then when COVID hit, I was locked inside, got super bored, and I realized I had spent a couple years as an advisor at that point where I had learned a lot of info that like younger me would have greatly benefited from because I didn't grow up with parents that were very financially illiterate. I didn't even learn much about personal finance in school as a finance major. But I was like, oh, I've worked with these people that obviously know what they're doing with their money. I worked with mostly high net worth individuals, and I saw like the secrets of the rich, if you want to call them that. And really, it was nothing secret at all. It's like, oh, invest in index funds, be responsible, budget, like all the things that we all know, obviously. But most people, most of my friends that were outside of the finance world didn't know that kind of stuff. And this new platform called TikTok was kind of coming on the scene. So I was like, oh, I see that this is a new, like lower lift way to make videos. Like you don't have to sit down for half an hour, record a YouTube video, then spend 4 hours editing it to put out a piece of content that no one's going to see because the YouTube algorithm doesn't like pushing long form content if you don't have a subscriber base already. But I saw with TikTok, you can make a video and it automatically gets sent to a couple hundred people, like a test group of users, to like see whether it's useful information or not, and then keeps pushing out to more and more people afterwards. So I was like, oh, I could start posting what I know on TikTok. Hopefully people like it. It turns out people did start to like it. I started building a following. And then about a year after I started doing that, I quit my job as a financial advisor, went all in on content creation. And yeah, since then, it's been like almost 3 years since I went full time. I've been creating content over 3.5 years in total. I really went all in on, I want my my educational content to be completely free. I don't want to charge my viewers anything because I wouldn't have been someone that wanted to pay for like any sort of financial information. I believe information should be free. And instead, I monetize like a media company. I work on brand partnerships with large financial brands who have all started to see the value that short form content provides, like Fidelity, Ally, SoFi, PenFed, a bunch of different large financial institutions that ring a bell for you guys. Um, so I do that to monetize my content and then make free content. And yeah, now we have N2 to help other advisors kind of get into this space.
Awesome. And Nate, before I tag you in, Nick, I have a follow-up question for you. So when you transitioned from being an advisor to going all in on content, was that purely because you said to yourself, "Hey, this is like truly what I want to do," or, and I don't know your setup, whether you were with a broker dealer or independent or what your actual background was, so feel free to share
Mhm.
that as well. But I also imagine maybe there was like just the annoyance of having to deal with compliance at that time where it's less so no you can't do that, and it's more so back a few years ago where compliance people would just say no because they didn't feel like figuring it out. How
Mhm.
much of that scenario, if at all, how much of that played a role in your decision?
Yeah, it partially did. I mean, I was with an independent firm. It was super small. There's literally three of us, including my boss and then an admin assistant. So I was
Gotcha.
basically like the middle guy in there. So compliance wasn't too big of an issue. They definitely weren't like the biggest fan of me making content. Like since we worked with a higher net worth clientele, they didn't really want too much of a presence on social media, at least from their perspective. I mean, from my perspective, it's like, yeah, let's blow this up. Let's get as many eyeballs on us as possible so we get more clients. But they didn't really see it that way. But so to answer your question of why I went full all in, it was really two things. One was I am a complete nerd about this stuff. Like I found like what I love doing is making like this educational video content. I love every single aspect of it. And I just found myself every single day at work, at my job as an advisor, just like thinking about this stuff nonstop. Like I was like, okay, yeah, we have to update this balance sheet, but I'm thinking about video topics I want to make. So I just found myself just daydreaming about that. And like, why don't I just do this full time? And then also at that point in time, I was getting a lot of inbound from brands where it just made a lot of like financial sense where I knew if I did make the jump that I would be able to support myself for at least the next couple of months just purely off of brand deals. Like I feel like my income would have been replaced and thankfully it was.
So before you made that switch, what was and I'm going to ask a bunch of like silly questions that
Yeah.
may you can decipher what I'm trying to say, but what was your following or your views at that point to where like before you left you said you had some brand folks reaching out to you, so like
Mhm.
where were you at then to justify a brand deal and those folks reaching out to you? Like what had you built it up to at that point?
Yeah, gosh. I mean, brands started reaching out pretty early on. I would say like around like 30 or 40,000 followers. On TikTok for context, I have like 1.7 million total now across platforms. But at the time I actually left and started doing brand deals seriously, I was probably around like 200 or 300,000. It's hard to remember back then.
Cool. Awesome. Nate, so you're, if my memory serves me correctly and understanding serves me correctly, you're still both working with clients for financial planning and obviously working with N2 content marketing. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then similar to Nick, give me a little bit about your background and sort of come up in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, you're totally right. I am currently using social media to build my brand as a financial advisor. And so I have a practice. I serve about 140, 150 clients. And social media from the very beginning was always designed to get clients for that practice. And Nick and I came up in a very, very similar way. I started with an independent RIA, super small firm. There were four of us in total. So we were very much in a similar situation. And when COVID struck, the firm that I was with actually dissolved. And so it was right before I graduated college. I graduated college in May of 2020, and I got laid off in April of 2020. And so I was like, well, what do I do? I've been the most employed college kid I know for the last 3 years. I'm not entirely sure where to go from here. So I shopped around a little bit, looked at insurance companies. I almost took a job with Mass Mutual selling life insurance, and that was probably the biggest bullet I've ever dodged was deciding not to go that route. And so I ended up figuring that if I was going to do something, I might as well start my own firm, because if COVID started to go away and I got a job for an independent RIA, I could always roll that firm into my book at that job. It wasn't going to be something that was necessarily going to close doors. So I sat down and I studied for my CFP and I started my company all through 2020, but I didn't have any of the tools that most advisors have when they're starting out. I didn't get to go to networking events. I didn't get to hold luncheons or anything of that sort. I had to build my firm entirely virtually. And so social media stuck out immediately. And as Nick said, there was this fun little app called TikTok kind of coming onto the scene. And so I made and posted my first video January 1st of 2021. And I was like, well, if I have 1,000 followers by the time I hit June of 2021, I will be stoked. I will count that as a win. And by the end of February, I think I had 50,000 followers. It was just so much more than I ever could have expected to get from it.
So one thing I'd be curious to understand from you, Nate. So looking back, and I hate talking about COVID, but it kind of tees up my next question, which is there are so many people who use COVID as an excuse and frankly justification for not doing what they know they need to do to create whatever their definition of success is. It was a built-in excuse that literally everyone in the world could use. And frankly, I just think that's BS to a certain degree. And then there's a certain percentage, a very small percentage of people that use that as an opportunity to build something of significance. Was that like a conscious decision of yours? Because like you could be like, oh, I'm down and out, I got laid off, COVID, all these layoffs, like you could have easily just kind of like curled up. What was it in you that made the decision of, no, this isn't going to define me, like this is going to build me, and I'm going to maximize the opportunity in front of me and create something out of nothing? Like that takes a lot of courage and audacity during that season that we all experienced to do what you did. What was that conversation like in your head that then propelled you to do what you're doing now?
I think it was a combination of things, because I definitely had a lot of privilege walking into COVID. Like I was not at risk of not being able to pay my rent. I wasn't suddenly stuck in a house with two kids who could no longer go to school that were now taking up all of my time. So I was in a really good position for it. I was in California at the time, and the unemployment benefit was $1,000 a week. And so there just was no financial concern. There was no time concern going on. And so I was never in a rush to go and get additional employment. And I had just finished college. So I was already kind of in an air gap. So none of it felt like I was falling behind. And none of it felt like I was really desperate to get anything done. And that put me in a really good position to, between episodes of Tiger King, kind of think about how I wanted to build my perfect life. Like I was like, okay, I have this chance where I don't have to move. I had been at a full on sprint, like making as much money as I possibly could the whole time I was in college. This was the first time I hadn't worked a 10 to 12-hour day in 3 years. And so I was like, well, let's stop for a moment and let's write this out. And I vividly remember pulling out a piece of printer paper. I didn't even have a journal or a notebook or anything like that. And just sketching out what I wanted my perfect world to look like in the next 4 or 5 years. And it all came back to starting a company. And that had always been out at the end of my 5 year plan. I knew that I wanted to have my own RIA, but I had always had these intentions of building that after I worked for an RIA and after I maybe came into a senior position underneath someone else. And all of that had been scooped out from under me. And so I was like, well, it's time to do my 5 year plan in like 6 months. Let's go. We might as well start. And from then on, the drive was that I was bored. Like it was that I just had nothing else going on. And I had been so used to filling 10 to 12 hours. Well, let's fill 10 to 12 hours with starting a company and with studying for my CFP.
Well, it's cool because a lot of people, that boredom would drive them to do things that aren't good, right? That aren't serving them. And I I like that you use the getting laid off as like I believe based on what you've shared that that happened for you, not to you. And you're where you are. I'm willing to bet, and maybe you think strongly otherwise, but I'm willing to bet that if that didn't happen, you'd still be thinking about what your ideal life would be like while you're stuck at that job. This kind of burned the boats for you, so to speak, and
Yes.
you maximize the opportunity to go all in. So I think that's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I ended up taking out my old boss to lunch and saying thank you so much for laying me off. And he was like, "What?" He was like, "I felt so bad for laying off that college kid who I had hired and who I was like cultivating to take over my firm, and then I just had to let him go right before he graduated college." I was like, "Yeah, best thing that ever happened to me. Thank you."
So I don't know which one of you wants to take this, but I'm curious to know, how did you guys meet?
Oh
Oh,
gosh.
Nick, you've got this one.
Yeah, I'll do it because I'm the one that found Nate. So we had been following each other on TikTok for I don't know how long, probably like a year or so before we actually met in person. But I'm originally from Minnesota. I moved to Denver in May of 2022, I believe. And then I think that fall, I told my Alexa to like show me local news. And this guy's face pops up. I'm like, what? Wait, I know who that is. Like, dude, you live in Denver? So I messaged him. I was like, man, you're in Denver. Let's meet up for breakfast. And we did, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
Now, when you guys met, was it, hey, let's figure something out? Or like what was the kind of inflection point from like, hey, let's meet because we both know each other from online, so to speak, to, hey, I think there's a problem that we could potentially solve together. Like how far from meeting to then ideating was there?
Yeah, I feel like the first reaction was, "Whoa, you are way taller than I thought you were from your social media videos." Because you can't tell on screen, but Nick is significantly taller than I am, and so it was much more like, yeah, it was much more just getting to know each other. Like we'd been following each other, and Nick was obviously incredibly successful in the social media space. So I was kind of like, whoa, okay, I got to step up a little bit. Like he can't. I want to show that I am worthy of this meeting. And the follow up was just, let's go for a hike. I think it was February or something like that
Mhm.
that we first had breakfast. So it was very similar to now, where it was just starting to be nice in Denver. We were just starting to be thinking about getting outside. So we were like, let's go adventure. Let's go do fun things together. And so we spent that summer really just hiking around. We went and did a couple 14ers and camped out and really just like ate up as much of Colorado as we could. And it wasn't until August of last year that we went on this hike, and Nick was like, okay, I've been reflecting, I've been thinking, what am I the best in the world at? Like, what is that one thing that I stand apart from everyone else in the world? And I think it's the fact that I am the most followed CFP on social media. Like, I get to claim that. And he was like, I think that I would be in such a good position to help other CFPs attain that level of success and that level of notoriety that I've been able to achieve. And he ended up, I mean, Nick, I don't even remember. After you said that, I kind of blacked out and I left that hike with a company idea. So what happened afterwards?
Yeah, basically. So I was obviously very good at creating the most engaging financial related content possible. Like I am very good at getting eyeballs on my content. And then again, how I monetize is I work with brands on different campaigns they're running on social media. So I'm good at driving conversions for those brands. But what Nate is one of the best people in the world at, if not the best, I think I would say he is the best. He's again like we said earlier, he's running his own RIA, basically only using social media to acquire clients, which is something that I don't know anything about because when I was an advisor, we didn't use social media for clients. Now that I'm full-time social media, I don't work with clients directly. But he knows the ins and outs of one, posting social media content as an advisor, all the compliance hoops you have to jump through, and then two, how to actually make content that converts clients or converts viewers into eventually warm leads and then converts warm leads into clients. So together, I know how to get the most eyeballs on a content possible. He knows everything financial advisor related about making content on short form. So it just was a complete no brainer to team up and do something with this specific skill set we have.
Nick, who inspired you to go down the content game? So, like, when I think of content, the first person that comes to mind is like Gary Vaynerchuk. Like,
Yeah.
do you have like a Gary V or someone or a group of people that inspired you to like shoot that first video? And if so, who is that?
Yeah, this is a fun story here. So actually, my content journey did not begin with financial content. It began when I was a freshman in high school. I started making gaming content on YouTube, and I got close to 100,000 subscribers, and I earned enough money from YouTube AdSense to pay for half of college with. But then I was like,
No
oh, like,
way.
I mean, it was like I was earning like 2 or 3K a month. So by the end of high school, like that's a lot of money for a high schooler. But I realized like, oh, I should go get like a real job, and like I can't earn a full-time living off this YouTube stuff forever. Looking back, that was the crazy mistake because there's gaming YouTubers making millions of dollars like a month these days. But happy to it because that was my first exposure into content, and that kind of gave me the itch. Like I knew early on I loved creating and creating videos, especially. But it wasn't until like basically in college I was a big reader of financial blogs, so like Mr. Money Mustache and like Financial Samurai, that sort of stuff. And so I think Financial Samurai especially started posting like income reports where I was like, oh, this blogging guy is talking about finance and he's earning a pretty good living from it. So I know like it is a possibility. So fast forward a couple of years, that's what eventually gave me the confidence to jump off and do this on my own. But yeah, I've been in content game for quite a while now.
Nice. Nate, what about you? Who was your inspiration to shoot your first video?
Mine was kind of tertiary in a weird way where I actually, the way I earned extra money when I was in college was I was a tutor because I was a finance and a data science major. And so we had really bad weeder classes. Like we had those portfolio management classes and those like data analytics classes that people just could barely get through. The people who were at the top of the class were running like C pluses or C minuses type of thing.
Yep,
And
that's
so
me.
I was like, you know what if I just tutored people for all of the classes that I had taken the previous semester? Because it was totally fresh. I had just done all the content. It wasn't going to change that much semester to semester. And even the textbooks would update usually on an annual basis. And so they would literally be working out of the exact same textbook that I did. So I started tutoring and charging 150 bucks an hour just to walk people through those courses and help them pass. And so I was watching a lot of tutoring videos. And I really started to follow the people who are tutoring data science and finance on YouTube. And I was like, wow, these guys have like 1 million followers and they're talking about Excel shortcuts. Like this seems so niche to me. And yet people are clearly making really good money off of it. And it's really successful, even if you're talking about what someone would consider to be boring. And despite being a financial advisor, I have always put finances in the boring category right next to Excel shortcuts and that sort of thing that people don't really seek out, but they really like to know when they decide they want to find it. And so it's actually working off of that model. And that's why you'll see that so much of my content is tutoring. Like it's walking them through kind of how to do XYZ, how a backdoor Roth works, how to actually go and deal with your RSUs. They're all modeled off of that tutoring approach rather than like a viral content creator. And I think that has created a really engaged audience for me, but it's always been a smaller audience because it's been less of that like really engaging, powerful financial content that Nick is so good at, and so much more like the niche YouTube video you would look up when you can't solve this math problem on your homework.
And you mentioned, Nate, with your background that you're currently serving, call it 140, 150 clients currently. And remind me of the time frame from when you launched to now, so I have a sense as to did that take 2 years, 3 years, 1 year? Like how long did that take to acquire those clients?
Yeah, I think I jumped into running a business having no idea what I was doing and had to spend the first 2 years figuring it out because I
Hmm.
technically started it in July of 2020, but I didn't really start growing it until June of 2022, really. Like that was when I really started building the business. I had about 30 clients walking in the door when I moved from California to Colorado and got my new Colorado LLC. And so we've scaled from 30 up to 140 since really July of 2022.
Now, did you start creating content right away when you launched, or did that start when you really started building the business in June of 22?
I started creating content January of 21. And so really that was, and I mean, I started creating content, but then I forgot to actually let people convert on it. Like I started the content, got 100,000 followers, and never even thought to like put my website in the bio or anything like that, much less create a custom landing page and actually track the funnel start to finish. I didn't even let people convert at all. And finally, in late 2021, did I even consider putting my website on there for someone to click on? Because finally, someone DM'd me on TikTok and said, "Hey, I had to go and figure out that you were a financial advisor. And then I had to submit a form on your website so that I could schedule a meeting with you." And I was willing to do that, but I know that most people aren't. I feel like you should probably make it easier for people to get in touch with you. And I was like, good point. I'll take that to heart.
It's unsolicited advice always stings at first, and then you reflect and you're like, yeah, the reason why it stung is because they're right. And
Yep.
and I
Yeah.
was the silly one who didn't think of that. So I don't know if you have this data per se. So maybe this is just a gut check question on your end, Nate. But I have the call it 150 clients. I'd be curious to know because you're I don't want to say obviously because there's obviously a chance that you don't, but somewhat obviously have gotten referrals from clients because they've had a presumably great experience in working with you. Um, but do you track like X amount of clients have come from referrals, X amount of clients have come directly from social media, not knowing anyone else that I currently work with? Do you track that by chance?
Yeah, and we're way better about it now. Like as we learn, we improve every single day and get better and better at it. And so I can tell you within a couple hundredths of a percentage point that we've gotten 94% of our clients in the last 6 months from social media. And the remainders have been referrals, family members, people coming in that just like heard of me through a nuclear network, and then also people who saw me on TV. And so it's that 94% social media, and then the remainders have been the extras.
Understood. And the reason why I ask is because when I'm working with advisors and they want to focus on building their brand, one of the things I share to try to set expectations is, hey, don't put everything else that you've done up through this point by the wayside because this takes a little bit longer to take its full form and to actually start panning out. But I share that it takes a little bit longer than what it took you. So what do you think on your end? Is it the shortness of the videos? Is it the platform that you're using? Is it the call to action? Is it the whole thing? Like, what do you think it is that's gotten you to stand out amongst other advisors who are creating content to actually turn it into business that doesn't take, 5 years to come to fruition?
Yeah, I I have had to put a number of puzzle pieces together to not only get the amount of traffic that I get, which is about 3 to 4 scheduled meetings per week on my calendar, but to also retain a 90% conversion ratio on those meetings that I have. And so there are a couple components that unfortunately can't be controlled for with a social media campaign or something of that sort. Those would be the offer. Like, what am I really giving to clients? And the offer that I will make is that we will do the entire financial plan for them. And if they don't like it, they don't pay for it. And so that's one thing that creates a lot of volume and gets a lot of people in the door. The other thing is my pricing model. I'm entirely fixed fee. We charge an upfront planning fee and then a monthly retainer. And so that appeals to a younger audience. And that is something that is considered to be whatever you want to call it, the new age of financial advice. There's a lot being thrown around. And then the final component is that I work with Henrys, high earners, not rich yet. And so these are people who are making a great amount of money, but have less than 500K invested. Those three things fit really nicely into the social media sphere.
Hmm.
And so the people that watch my content and the people that then go to my landing page and learn about what Hoskin Capital does, they find something that really speaks to them because everything has been fine-tuned from start to finish to make it so that by the time they see the button to schedule a call, they're the perfect person that I want to talk to. So there's a lot that works behind the scenes that I think has allowed me to really ramp up and be onboarding as many clients that I am. But I think that for any advisor, you can optimize at least the first two pieces, which is having really good educational content that targets the client you want to work with. And then you can have a sales funnel to get them to set up a meeting. So if I could attribute it, I would say that probably 30% of my overall success would be attributed to my offer and my business model. 70% would be attributed to my ability to create really, really good content. And so if we look at that on a timeline, what I was able to do in 2 years, less than 2 years, is what someone without the offer, without the perfect product market fit, might be able to do in 3 years or 4 years, which sounds like we're getting a little bit closer to what you tell advisors it usually takes.
And
Understood.
one thing I'd like to add is you kind of mentioned what a lot of people you work with, maybe they work on different forms of content, different mediums like podcasts, long form videos, different things like that. Short form video is definitely the fastest way to grow an audience because one, every single social media platform out there, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, they are all, even LinkedIn these days, they just made a post. They're all prioritizing short form video content because that's what most people spend time watching. We pulled these stats we make on our website, but about 244 million people watch an average of 17 hours of short form video content every single week in just in the United States. And 17 hours, that's a lot, yes. But when you think about it, the average short form video is like 30 to 60 seconds long. So they're watching a lot of content. So even though there may be more competition, people don't have to choose between watching like, oh, I either watch this 45-minute podcast or this 45-minute podcast. Like, no, you can watch every single financial content creator's piece of content in like 30 minutes for the day. And there's a lot more room for you to grow. And then also, like I mentioned when I was giving my background, these short form algorithms are so powerful at just putting your content in front of people if it's good content. So for example, like when you post a piece of short form content on TikTok, on YouTube, Instagram's a little bit harder, but and Facebook too, the algorithm will automatically show your content to a group of a couple hundred people, which if you're posting a podcast, your first episode without any followers, you're not going to get any listens unless you actively promote that thing yourself. But the algorithm does that job for you. And as long as your metrics are high, like watch time, engagement, etc., it'll push it out to more and more and more people until like the performance kind of levels off across or against other videos that are sort of at that same performance band in the algorithm. So, I mean, Nate, your first video on TikTok would get like 1 million views.
Yeah, I had 3 videos. The 3 of the 4 first videos that I posted got over 500,000 views. And so I was able to go from non-existent, barely had a company and was 22 years old to suddenly being like one of the more watched finance creators within a given month. And that level of, yeah, just that level of reach. I mean, everything that someone wants in a perfect paid ad that they're willing to put thousands and thousands of dollars behind. I mean, when you're looking at a paid ad, you want it to hit the people you want to work with and you want them to pull some sort of value from it so that they decide to click on a link. That's a whole paid ad campaign that's going to cost a lot of money when we have these social media algorithms doing it for us for free. Like I didn't even, yeah, Nick, you bring up such a good point because I didn't even think about the fact that every single step along that journey, I was always able to put my offer and my business model in front of the exact people it was meant to cater to. And it's just not even a consideration because, of course, like these social media algorithms are so good at what they do, I can assume implicitly that it's reaching the human beings that I want to work with.
I have a lot of follow-up questions. Nate, I'm going to come back to you. Don't let me forget to bring up Alex Hormozy. But Nick, I want to go down a path that you started to bring up when comparing short form and long form content. So one of the things that we found in working with financial advisors is, and I'm being general here, obviously there's exceptions to every rule. But generally, advisors are practitioners of financial planning, and that's where they excel. They are not content creators first. Oftentimes they need to be convinced to do that. I